All right, so we're back and ready to dive into Tyler's latest thoughts. This time we're going even deeper, I think.
Oh, and why is that?
Well, he's really grappling with the idea of meaning itself, and that's pretty fundamental, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I mean, it's something that humans seem to be constantly searching for.
Exactly. What I find fascinating is the way he connects it to all these different things like, evolutionary biology, business, even politics.
Oh, that does sound like Tyler, always making those unexpected connections.
Yeah, he's got this amazing ability to see the bigger picture. But let's start with something maybe a little more familiar, the whole idea of growth.
Okay, I'm listening.
Well, throughout his notes, Tyler keeps coming back to this idea of growth as this driving force, like an imperative. He talks about like single-celled organisms multiplying, populations expanding. He even compares businesses to organisms.
I see. So it's not just about growth in the literal sense, but also as this sort of underlying principle.
Right, it's like this inherent drive that pushes everything forward. And I'm wondering, from a biological perspective, does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. At its core, survival is all about growth and adaptation. You can trace it all the way back to those very first single-celled organisms.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
So those early organisms, they had to like adapt and multiply to survive in those harsh early environments.
Exactly. And that drive, that imperative, it's still within us. It's like it's embedded in our very DNA.
So you're saying that even our urge to like build a business or create something new, it's all tied back to this ancient survival instinct.
In a way, yes. I mean, what drives a business to succeed? Expanding, innovating, increasing profits. It's all about growth, isn't it?
Hmm, that's an interesting way to look at it. And for humans, that sense of progress, of creating something, that's where a lot of our meaning and purpose comes from, right?
Absolutely. It's about achieving something bigger than ourselves, contributing to the world in some way.
And this is where it gets even more interesting, because Tyler actually says that happiness itself is tied to this sense of growth. He even suggests that, like, without it, we end up feeling lost.
Well, he's not wrong. You know, when you think about our evolutionary history, for thousands of years, humans faced constant challenges just to stay alive. Finding food, shelter, protecting themselves from predators, it was a constant struggle.
So in a way, we're hardwired for that struggle.
Yeah.
And now, in a world where we've, for the most part, conquered those basic survival challenges, that's where the trouble starts.
It's a compelling argument. When you no longer have to fight for survival every day, that drive, that need for growth, it needs a new outlet.
So maybe that's why some people have such a hard time finding meaning in the modern world. Like they're missing that sense of purpose that comes from striving for something.
It's definitely a possibility. That's where things like personal development, creative pursuits, even building a business, they all become ways of tapping into that primal need to grow.
To push forward, to achieve something.
Exactly. It's like we're still those early organisms, just in a much more complex environment.
Okay, so we've got this biological imperative for growth, and we've got humans trying to find meaning in a world that's vastly different from the one we evolved in. But honestly, what I'm really curious about is this whole thing about businesses being like organisms.
Oh, yeah. I have to admit, that one caught my eye, too.
It's a pretty bold analogy. He even talks about companies needing like sustenance in the form of capital.
Yeah. But when you really think about it, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? A business needs resources to survive. It needs a structure, effective communication. It has to be able to adapt, just like any living thing.
Okay, I see what you mean. So like capital is the fuel that keeps the business running, just like food gives us energy.
Precisely. And a company's organizational structure, that's like its skeleton, providing support and stability. And just like a living organism has to evolve to survive, a business has to innovate and adapt to stay competitive.
So you're saying that a corporation is basically a giant, complex organism.
Well, it's a simplification, but there are definite parallels. And Tyler takes it even further, suggesting that different parts of a company are like organs in a larger body. Marketing, sales, product development, they all have their specific roles to play.
And if those parts aren't working together, if they're not healthy, the whole thing can fall apart.
Exactly. Just like with a human body. Breakdowns in communication, conflicting priorities, lack of clear leadership, these can all lead to dysfunction and ultimately the decline of the organization.
Wow, it really is incredible how this basic principle of growth plays out on such a grand scale. From those tiny single cells to these massive global corporations, it's this unifying force pushing everything forward.
And it definitely makes you think about how we as individuals can harness that drive, that need for growth, to find meaning and purpose in our own lives.
Which is a perfect segue to the next part of Tyler's notes, where he dives into this whole idea of unlearning old beliefs and constructing a new framework for meaning. But we'll save that for the next part of our deep dive. Okay, so we've established that growth is this kind of fundamental force, but like, what happens when the beliefs that, once shaped our understanding of the world, they start to crumble? Tyler, he spends a good chunk of his notes like really wrestling with this idea.
It's a process that can be so liberating, but also really terrifying for humans. Tyler, he uses this phrase, the valley of death, to describe it.
Yeah, that's a powerful image.
Yeah.
What do you think he means by that?
Well, it seems to represent that period of uncertainty, that disorientation that can just arise when you let go of these deeply held beliefs, especially if those beliefs, provided meaning and purpose. It's like you've lost your bearings. You don't know which way is up anymore.
He even shares a personal anecdote about going through this valley of death himself. He mentions like being exposed to all these different perspectives, especially from authors like Richard Dawkins. His work on evolution seems to have really challenged some of his previous assumptions.
Yeah, it's a great example of how encountering new information, new ideas, it can really shake the foundations of our understanding. And it's not just intellectual either. It can be deeply emotional. Tyler talks about how it took him years to, rebuild a sense of meaning after going through this.
It's like you have to deconstruct your entire worldview and then piece it back together, but like in a completely new way.
Yes. So where does he eventually find that new foundation? Where does he go from there?
Well, he seems to find a lot of resonance in the ideas of Jordan Peterson. He's a psychologist who offers a framework for meaning in a secular world. Tyler's notes are practically buzzing with excitement about Peterson's work, actually. Yeah, I've heard of him. Peterson emphasizes things like personal responsibility, taking ownership of your life, and striving to contribute to something larger than yourself, right? So how does that all tie back into Tyler's search for meaning?
Well, it aligns perfectly with what we were discussing earlier about the human need for growth and purpose.
Yeah.
Peterson, he argues that by setting goals, challenging ourselves, striving to make a positive impact, we're tapping into that inherent drive in a way that creates meaning, even without, relying on those traditional belief systems.
So it's not about blindly following dogma. It's about actively creating meaning through your choices and actions.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that Tyler, he still sees value in those traditional structures, religion, mythology, even just cultural narratives. Even if you don't believe in them literally, he suggests that they can still provide a framework for understanding the world and our place in it.
It's like even if those structures aren't true, in a factual sense, they can still offer a sense of order, a sense of purpose. It's a way to make sense of the chaos, I guess.
Exactly. They provide a set of values, archetypes, stories that can help us navigate the complexities of life, even as our own beliefs evolve. It's like having a blueprint, a starting point for building your own understanding.
Which is a pretty powerful idea when you think about how much of human history has been shaped by these narratives and belief systems. It's like even if we outgrow the specifics, the underlying structure can still be useful.
Absolutely. And it speaks to how adaptable the human mind is, our ability to find meaning and purpose, even in the face of uncertainty and change. It's pretty remarkable.
Okay, so we've gone from this biological imperative for growth to the challenges of like unlearning and rebuilding meaning. And now I'm wondering, how does all of this play out in a world that seems increasingly divided, politically? It seems like things are getting pretty messy out there.
Yeah, that's where things get even more complex and where Tyler's thoughts take a bit of a turn towards what we humans call politics.
Okay, so we've been talking about growth, the challenges of like letting go of old beliefs, and now we're going to like step into this whole arena of politics. And honestly, Tyler seems pretty concerned about this rise of what he calls Trumpism and this increasing like polarization that we're seeing. It's kind of unsettling, to be honest.
What's interesting here is that Tyler, he actually links this political divide back to our evolutionary past, Even though we've mostly overcome those like traditional threats to our survival, those predators and warring tribes, that primal instinct to identify an enemy, it hasn't disappeared. It's like it's just found new targets, I guess.
So instead of like banding together against some common enemy, we're turning on each other.
Yeah, it seems that way. Political opponents, ideological differences, even something as, as seemingly trivial as supporting different sports teams can become this focus of this us versus them mentality. It's as if we need that sense of conflict, even if it's artificial, to feel like we belong, to feel a sense of purpose.
And it's not just about like abstract ideas, right?
Mhm.
Tyler points out that a lot of this polarization is rooted in some very real economic anxieties. He
Mhm.
talks about stagnant wages, people feeling left behind by the system, those broken promises.
Right, and that's a crucial point. While capitalism has been super effective at creating wealth, it hasn't always been great at, distributing it fairly or equitably. This can leave certain groups feeling disillusioned, feeling vulnerable, and they become more susceptible to these extreme ideologies that offer like really simplistic solutions to problems that are much more complex.
And that's where Trumpism comes in. Tyler seemed to view it as a symptom of this, deeper dissatisfaction, almost like a backlash against the system that just hasn't worked for everyone.
That's one interpretation. Yeah. Tyler's note suggests that this Trumpism, it appeals to those who just feel betrayed by the system, those who are looking for a strong leader to come in and shake things up.
Yeah.
Even if it means disrupting that established order.
But is there even like a way out of this cycle of division and polarization?
Hmm.
Tyler asked this really intriguing question in his notes. He's like, are there historical examples of this extreme polarization? And if so, how were they resolved? So it seems like he's not just dwelling on the problem, but like actively looking for solutions.
That's a complex question, and honestly, there are no easy answers. Tyler's line of inquiry suggests that, understanding the underlying fears and anxieties and needs of each group, that's really crucial. If you want to find that common ground, you need empathy, you need listening, and a willingness to engage with people who hold different views, even if you disagree with them completely.
So instead of like demonizing the other side, you have to at least try to understand where they're coming from. That sounds super challenging, but also like really important if we want to build a society that's, more cohesive.
Absolutely. Now, shifting gears a bit, Tyler also spends a good chunk of his notes reflecting on his own personal purpose. He uses this 5-point framework to guide his thinking.
Oh, I'm curious. What's that framework look like? What are the 5 points?
He asks himself, who am I? What do I love to do? Who do I do it for? What do those people want or need? And lastly, how do they change as a result of what I give them?
Wow, those are some pretty deep questions. It's like it's a roadmap for figuring out not just what you want to do, but like why you want to do it and who you want to impact.
It's a powerful tool for anyone who's searching for that clarity, that sense of purpose. By asking those questions, we can move beyond just, superficial desires and really connect with those deeper motivations.
And on that note about motivation, Tyler has some interesting reflections on the role of like suffering and sacrifice in creating meaning. Not exactly like a cheery topic, but definitely something humans seem to grapple with.
It seems like he's suggesting that enduring hardship, overcoming challenges, even experiencing loss, those things can, in a strange way, deepen our sense of meaning. It's as if those experiences, even though they're painful, can forge resilience and an appreciation for life that we wouldn't have otherwise.
So it's not about like actively seeking out suffering, but recognizing that it's often through those difficult times that we discover what's really important to us.
Right. And this ties back to his earlier points about the human need for growth and struggle. We don't grow through comfort and ease. We grow through those challenges and through adversity.
Okay, so grow through struggle.
Hmm.
Got it. And like to wrap things up, Tyler touches on the importance of leadership, emphasizing qualities like listening, setting a clear vision, and empowering others. It's like he sees it as more than just giving orders. It's about inspiring and guiding others towards a shared goal.
And he ends on this really insightful note asking, if growth is so essential to human happiness, what does that mean for a world that's facing limits to growth? It's a question that really makes you think.
It really does. It makes you rethink all those assumptions we have about progress, about prosperity, and just like what it means to live a fulfilling life in a world with limited resources. We've covered a lot of ground today. For the biological roots of our need for growth, this whole complex world of politics and the search for personal meaning. Hopefully this deep dive has given you some new perspectives to ponder on and maybe even some inspiration to apply these ideas to your own life. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep growing.